is that important to them? And so by that, thinking about that and framing what we're going to talk about, I hope that I'll be able to share today is going to sort of inspire you to think about how you might make some shifts in your classrooms. I'm going to include some things to share with administrators, with students, and even a little bit with parents to help parents become a partner with you in making sure that students actually um, be really excited about your class, but more importantly, are excited about language learning. So this is just the first question I want to think about and frame everything is what if a small credential could help solve a really big problem? And these are the problems we see across the country, both in K-12 and also in higher ed with language programs, which are declining enrollments, and really student uncertainty about the value of language study. They really don't think it's worth it. They don't understand why it's valuable, and they're not perceiving language as a subject. They're looking at it more as a checkoff box to get into maybe a college program. And so these are the four pieces that I kind of want to talk about. The first is how do we just look at language skills as leverage for future opportunities? The second is what are we doing with the global SEAL side of to really support those opportunities? And then some strategies for you to take into your classroom or into conversations with parents and administrators and students about how language intersects and integrates with potential career opportunities. And then, most importantly, how certification pathways and leading to certification, be it the global seal or your state seal or both, can really impact your language programs. And I'm going to show you some actual programs and some data. So I'm just going to start with this first question, and this was a big check for me as well. And I've often asked this when I've done a presentation to teachers: is how are we communicating bilingualism's value? Students are not connecting with what we value. So we might value the cultural, relationships. We might value the opportunities we've had to travel. We might value the people that we've met. All of these experiences. That is not the experience of the student in your classroom. They can't connect to any of that. It's just too abstract. And so they are asking, why do I have to take a foreign language? And so these are, of course, this is looking at data and research, but these are some of the reasons why students say, I don't want to take one, or they take the minimum required and then escape as soon as they can. Or they're taking, and as was the case in my own classroom, they sometimes will take the class, but they're only there to pass the course to be able to check off the college entrance requirement. They're not there to acquire a language. So they're looking for the checkbox, not a language skill. So the first thing that students will say is it's too hard. Even before they walk into your classroom, they may perceive that it's going to be difficult and they have anxiety, oftentimes with regards to speaking. Another problem is it doesn't fit my schedule or graduation plan. If they believe that they're going into science or some other subject, they don't see where language fits. They also struggle to oftentimes fit language into their schedule if it's a higher level course, a third year or fourth year course, because it may not be offered frequently throughout the day, and they may be making a choice between AP chemistry and your course. Another problem that students increasingly are saying is that I don't see how I'll even use it. Now, they look to think, well, maybe there's AI or other kinds of things. So there's a lack of perceived relevance. They don't quite get the connection. I'm afraid of speaking. This is oftentimes an issue, and sometimes, well, in my school district, it led to students choosing to take Latin because they didn't think they were going to have to speak. And lastly, it doesn't help me get ahead. So again, this idea of there's no visible value, and these are real issues that impact not whether or not, I mean, whether our students will take the class, but oftentimes if they'll continue to actually get language proficiency to upper levels. Now, this same approach was studied by several professors at Michigan State University, and they wrote a book of a number of different university case studies where language programs were thriving. And so they kind of, again, approach the what's happening that's creating the problems or the barriers to language study. And these are the four top pieces that came out in their survey and their data. Again, the lack of perceived value, logistical barriers, the same things the students are telling us, cultural attitude, where, English is enough, or, they're concerned about, other languages taking over. And again, the lack of relevance. So this is over and over again the theme in the research about why students don't want to take our classes. But when you insert into the class dynamic the opportunity to earn something that students perceive as relevant and valuable outside of the classroom after graduation, everything changes. And so these are just a few student perceptions on certificates and certifications. So this one, the first one that's here, comes from a CTE program in high school in Nevada, where in this case, the student felt like the seal, in this case, she earned a global seal, allowed her employers to see that she had fluency in the language. That she was actually able to get a job right out of high school. And I'm going to share in this seminar some other opportunities for your students right out of high school to use their language in a part-time or summer job. And the idea that it was worth it in the end. This is from the Foreign Language Annals and a study that I shared with Kristen Davin and others. And we interviewed and did focus groups with students regarding seals of biliteracy. And one student said, well, it gives you a motive to finish. Before I was like, why am I in this class? That same article, we learned that 79% of secondary students thought the seal of biliteracy would benefit them in the future. That's not the answer they gave when you asked about just taking a language class. They don't see the connection unless you can document it on what feels like an official work document. And this comes from the University of Oregon, where a student just said, finally, a test that means something, because a test was required to earn the seal. And so what we know about language is that language is actually a work skill. And so a lot of times we're seeing in the CTE career and tech areas, we're seeing more students interested in language courses because they're starting to earn certificates. And so this comes from another vocational program where they talked about how the Global Seal of Biliteracy has bridged the gap between learning and career readiness. So I would challenge you, if you have a CTE program or career or any kind of vocational piece, that those are students, and I'll share a little more why, that are really important to attract to your programs. Because actually what we see when we look at these kinds of students and these kinds of programs is they already understand certification. If they're in a culinary class, they have to take a test for knife safety from OSHA before they can go in the kitchen. So they're already understanding that skills matter and certificates matter. And so this gives you a practical look at another career in tech high school and what the Global Seal has done for their foreign language, in this case, their Spanish language enrollment. So you'll see that the first year of their class of 22, only 10 students earned the Global Seal of Biliteracy. 2 years later, that had almost tripled. And we see this over and over again in programs because now students aren't working toward a grade or a course credit. They're working for something they perceive to be really, really valuable. And that information about adding a certificate program or recognition or any kind of document to students is showing up in the data to be incredibly effective. It is a solution. So on the left, these are just a few extra data points. So we saw high school foreign language enrollment increased in schools that offered a seal of biliteracy, whether that was a state seal or a global seal, by 25 to 30 to almost 1/3. So that's a huge impact on your programs. We see programs hiring more and more teachers because of that. In another study, this comes from actually Albuquerque Public Schools. They actually, in 1 year, saw students level up from our first tier of the Global Seal to the second tier in just 1 year. And that was almost 100 students that did that. we see data coming about how when you offer certificates, it increases program completion. We don't want students just taking our first and second year course and walking away and then coming back to us later and say, I only took 2 years and I can't say anything. We need them to stay long enough to actually be functional in the language and be excited about using it in their real life. Another program, Bob Jones University found that when they introduced stackable credentials, so they could earn this one, then they could earn another level and another tier, that they saw a 20% drop in their dropout rates. So we see that they make a positive. And I think I'm really excited about the example that's on the right. We saw this is the University of Wisconsin, and this was a small one of their extension campuses. So this is in La Crosse. They did not have a 4-year program in languages other than Spanish. And so that those other less common languages just had enough students to take 1 and 2 years. But this particular group of students decided, well, we have to get our global seal in 2 years because there's not a third year offering. And they were actually able to do that in 3 semesters. And what was really special about it was because it was in Chinese and Japanese. And so students, when given the opportunity to accelerate, that's another tool. When you give them autonomy and you give them a goal, they're willing to work toward it. And so we see an increase, especially in higher education, where credentials are being used to keep students longer, to increase the acquisition of language, to increase participation, enrollment, retention. And we see that in just a few of these pieces. So I was really excited. University of Texas at Austin, which is using the Global Seal, they found that 40% of their certificate earners go on and they're going to stack additional credentials. In other words, when you feed students a little success, they want more. And so this idea of adding credentials, and especially ones that can stack, really empowers students and can impact your programs. This is from the University of Texas at Arlington, where their upper division course enrollment has doubled since they introduced the Global Seal. And so we see this across all different sorts of schools and programs. When you give students recognition, they're willing to work for it. And so that's the exciting piece, whether it's a state seal or the Global Seal. If you don't have a program in your school or you're not promoting it to all students, then you're missing an opportunity. To kind of share what that looks like at one high school level over time, this is a high school in Alabama. This is Vestavia Hills. And their first year in 2017, they actually had their own local seal because they didn't get a state seal until 2021. The following year, they started with the Global Seal, and you'll notice the difference over time. Now, they require students to actually apply. I'm going to seek their seal of biliteracy. And you'll see that the number of students that were assessed or tested and those that were recipients. What happened in that first year with 44, their overall student enrollment has not gone up by very much. In fact, last year it went down. But after 8 years with the program, 24% of their senior class was recognized with a Global Seal of Biliteracy. And so it's students, the number continued to grow. The population of the school didn't grow, but the number of students in language programs and those succeeding in taking upper levels of language programs continues to increase every year. And so the Global Seal, if you're unfamiliar with it, was founded and started in 2018 to be originally really a gap filler. At that time, a lot of states did not yet have a seal of biliteracy. University students could not earn a seal, or students in private schools or community heritage weekend language programs. Certainly any number of secondary schools. And so the Global Seal was there to fill in the gap. And so we worked with students both in secondary schools, in universities, and working adults, including teachers. And so the goal is, if language is important enough to sort of, promote it to our students, then it's important enough to document because the rest of the world doesn't know that it's valuable until there's a paper or some kind of credential attached to it. And employers will not pay for language skills unless they're documented and that piece of paper is somehow attached to it. And so we believe on the Global Seal side that by providing the documentation and making it easy for students to share their skills and their documentation, we open opportunity and we open doors. So unless we take it seriously by actually measuring it and certifying it, no one else, we can't expect anyone else to take it seriously. And so using a lot of information, research, and data around what makes a good credential, the Global Seal has tried to imitate and take on those characteristics. So the first one is it needs to be visible. If a student doesn't have a way to share their certificate, it's not visible, that makes it really hard for the students to sort of brag about. And a next one is comparable. If an employer or university is comparing two different candidates, one has something that's visible, one doesn't, or one has a higher level of a skill, that comparability is something that employers value. Universities and employers both want the skill to be verifiable. In other words, they want a checkup to make sure this is real. Now, for the Global Seal, that our digital credential has a full transcript service. And that's important because we've had numerous universities say we don't accept paper certificates. And one university even said any student can make that in Canva. So if it's not digital, universities oftentimes are no longer even accepting of a paper certificate version. So for a lot of schools that might be, if with a state seal might be something you add to the transcript, there's got to be a way to make it visible and hopefully verifiable. Shareable. Students want to brag, they want to share it, they want to use it and leverage their skills. And more importantly, from the research, if it's stackable, you keep students in the programs longer because they want to continue to level up. And so the Global Seal is international, it is digital and easy to share, it is stackable, and it is verifiable. So we have 3 tiers: our functional fluency at intermediate, mid, our working fluency at advanced low, and our professional fluency at advanced high and above. All 3 forms have a digital language profile version, which is what the students are able to use to create a transcript, to share their test scores, to integrate with LinkedIn, to do any, share their certificate and leverage it on an application. This allows them to have that tool. And so this is what the paper certificate version looks like. And this is also the same information that would be found in the digital version. So the level the student has, the 2 languages in which they've certified, their dominant language and that second, third, fourth, or fifth other language. What level of language proficiency are they at in that second or third language? What year? What is the date? Who is the school or the organization, the business that certified the individual, their location? And then the most important part at the bottom is a unique serial number. No other individual will have that serial number, and that allows it to be verifiable and to integrate into different kinds of LinkedIn platforms and other hiring services. And so this is kind of the summation of what I've just shared. So it's verifiable, portable, it is standardized. The Global Seal is test agnostic. So we have a variety of different tests that qualify, similar to a state seal of biliteracy might. And we can certify over 170 different languages currently with our approved tests. We have tests on both the ACTFL as well as the CEFR, the CEFR, or the Common European Framework of Reference scale as well. So that's another option. There are 3 different tiers I shared with you. It's We are internationally recognized, and these other tools are how students can share their certificate, whether it's through LinkedIn, through the digital credentials, or academic transcripts. And I'll share a little image of those. So what we do is we take any number of tests that qualify. Those test scores are submitted to us, and the student then receives their digital language profile through that serial number. If the school chooses, they might choose the paper certificate as well. Now, every individual needs that digital profile because that's the real working tool. That's the one that they'll be able to share. That's the one they'll be able to use on an application. But the paper certificate can be valuable for framing or for those programs where you want to really applaud your students. Right now, we're receiving a number of submissions for students that earned their Global Seal through an advanced placement test. But if they were a senior last year, they've already left the building. So in this case, the digital one serves really well because the school can email it to the student, and they don't have to wait for a delivery or a pickup. And you can see there's our current map. So a number of different countries there. And I noticed there are a number, some of you are likely to be Chinese teachers, and we actually just certified a large number of students at a couple of schools in China just this last week. So this is it's something that really allows the student to travel with their certificate as well. This is what the digital profile looks like. So when they get their certificate, all they will do is create their account with their personal password. They will enter in their Global Seal serial number, and that will give them the opportunity to create their own profile, which will look like their certificate. There'll be a facsimile, a little image of their actual certificate, but there's also a definition of what they're able to do in the language at the level of their certificate. If they've earned more than one certificate, they've leveled up from intermediate mid to advanced low, the most recent certificate is at the top. If they've earned certificates in more than one language, and we have students that have earned 4 and 5 Global Seals in different languages. Whatever is the most current one will appear at the top, but with one click, they can share all of their language documents and certifications in just that one click. And you can see that they can share it by creating a transcript. They can copy the URL. They can send it through social media. They can send it via email. Lots of different ways for them to share their digital certificate, which is then again verifiable. So a lot of times we'll see students use these for applications, whether it's for work or for school or maybe a study abroad program. But employers increasingly want to see evidence of skills. They don't want to know what your grade was in the class. And unless a student at the college level has a major or a minor in language, most of the time they don't even know they have the language because language classes, they don't look at the transcript and see what courses they took. They only see what the major or the minor is. And so it's really important that the students have an easy way to share their skill that's documented and then again can be verified and validated. Or, for example, used on LinkedIn. So that's the example I'll share in just a minute. This is the free transcript service students have. So once they've created their digital profile, they can use it to send a transcript. They can choose between an academic transcript or a workplace transcript. If it's an academic transcript, which is what's shown here, their test scores that back up the certificate, that what test they took, what their scores were, will appear on their transcript. It will have a description of what that student can do in an academic setting at that level of language, and it provides suggested college credit based on the NCE sort of suggested guidelines for their level of language skill. So it actually helps support them getting to either advanced placement or university competency-based credit. So these are pieces that are really important to our students, so it's easier for them to share. If they choose to share it on LinkedIn, Then they will enter in that will automatically enter and feed in their serial number. If when they create their language profile, they can choose to keep it private. If they're under 14, it will remain private. But once they're over that age, they can choose to make it public. If they do, when they click add it to example for LinkedIn, a little button will say show credential. If they've kept their profile private, that will not appear. They can just put the information in, but it won't show the actual credential. But if they choose to make it public and they click on show credential, this happens to be mine, their credential from the Global Seal platform will pop up right into on their LinkedIn page. So what we're trying to do is make it easy for students to share their skills. And a lot of students now use LinkedIn similar to the Common App as a way to highlight things as they're applying for college. Not only do the students get their own profile piece, but so do the organizations and the schools that use Global Seal and award it. So when you set up a free account, there's no charge to award the Global Seal. You actually, as a school, you can have different users, you can have different teachers that are submitting scores, but you'll be able to have a school dashboard. This is going to show you how many students. You can print out a list if you're not sure who got it last year and needs it this year. You'll be able to decide how you want to send them. Do you want a physical paper certificate? Do you want to send it via email? Do you want to use an award letter you can print off because you're in a hurry? Um, you'll also be able to see all of the different first languages and second languages your school has issued certificates in. And you'll be able to see a fluency distribution. So how many of them are at functional fluency? How many of them are at working fluency? If you have teachers, how many are at professional fluency? And you can toggle dates and create reports for administration. So now you're really showing progress. You can show impact. And this is how schools are learning, like, wow, last year, our fluency distribution wasn't this high, or we didn't have as many students. So you can kind of compare from year to year. And so that's a really big piece. So many schools, because we're giving students more ways to use their seal of biliteracy, there are a lot of schools that choose to use both programs. So they award the state seal and the global seal. And depending upon your state seal's criteria, sometimes it's the same thing, or you can actually create stackable pieces if students that are testing at a higher level than the state seal. What's really exciting about this is because it's important to support the state seals. That's our way to show government that we value language skills and we value language teachers and programs. So it's really important. And some states, like my state of Illinois, provide automatic university credit for state seal recipients. So it's always important to give the student as many opportunities as they can to sort of recognize and use their language skills. So at this point, I kind of want to shift a little bit to the practicality that we talked about students are aware of. Students want language to be relevant. They want it to be useful. They're very pragmatic. They want it to, add benefit to their life. And so as language teachers, we're kind of guilty sometimes of not helping students envision themselves using language in the life that they're planning for themselves. And so if we think about it, we have to stop talking about language jobs. Most students probably don't want to become the language teacher, although I'm always excited when some of my students did choose that. Maybe they don't see themselves as a translator and we've set them up like at the UN or something, or traveling abroad and working in another place. For most students, that's far beyond their imagination's capabilities. And so we have to help them understand how they can use language with whatever job they're choosing or they're interested in. And so we have to shift our language and start talking about jobs with language, because bilinguals can do any job at all. And in fact, they can probably do some of those jobs even better. And so Some of you, as you're beginning the school year, may have back to school nights with parents. And so here's some things that you might want to think about sharing with parents. First of all, tell your parents that it's important that students don't just take a language, but they take a language to become bilingual. So it's not just checking off 2-year credit for college, it's becoming usable, functional in that language. Let them know that 4 years of coursework might show commitment, but proficiency is the real goal. So it's not just, again, about getting through the classes, it's about getting the language. And that a global seal certificate or a state seal of biliteracy is a way that students can prove they have language skills that are, as I put it, comprehensible input to employers or to universities. Without the document to prove it, nobody really knows what language skills you actually have. And so here are 6 things you can talk to parents about. And we're actually creating a little flyer that you can actually pass out to parents. It's going out in our next Global Seal newsletter, and it includes some of these ideas. First, bilingualism is a career skill. In many different jobs, there is higher pay for bilinguals. There are sign-on bonuses, so that's a really big piece. Two languages always equal more opportunities. Employers have consistently respond on surveys that given the choice between 2 identical potential hiring candidates, if one is bilingual, they will select the one who is bilingual. 3, 4 years of language strengthens a competitive application. This is especially true in certain very highly select universities. If you have those 4 years, that's a big kind of like green flag that that's going to be a good student. 4, encourage proficiency, not just the credits. Again, we're looking at, for the Global Seal recipients, we're actually working with universities to provide, and some universities are providing up to 16 hours of university credit for our recipients. So we want them to not just think about the credits, they're useful, but the only way to get them is through proficiency. Bilingualism builds highly in-demand soft skills, and we have a poster on our website you can download for your classroom about all of the brain science and data that shows that there's students who are bilingual are more flexible. They work better with communication. They're more, they do well in teams. There are all kinds of brain soft skills that employers want are byproducts of second language acquisition. And lastly, that bilingual skills can make an application or a resume stand out. And so parents, again, they're wanting to find out because if you have them, they're the ones that are going to help students and influence choices when they are, when the students come around for the next year's enrolling in classes. So let them know, even as they're first year students, about the seals of iliteracy, about these opportunities, because parents increasingly want their students to have those things. Another piece that you might share with parents is that individuals with digital credentials have a 28% higher earning potential. Again, employers want to prove it. They don't want to know that you took the class. They want to know that you acquired the skill. And that bilinguals are in all different fields. So here's an example from Ohio that students or individuals with stackable credentials earn 37% more than those who did not. That was especially true in health-related fields. Low-income students, this is a great equalizer for students in low-income areas because that moving to higher level credentials bridges the earning gap that they might oftentimes otherwise be challenged by. And so here's something I want to really throw out, and knowing Nebraska as a state with not only industry, but a lot of agriculture, oftentimes parents feel that students that are going into industry or into the agricultural space don't need a language. However, if you look at the last 5 years, this period in Indeed, that bilingual preferred was 57 to 64% of their non-degree seeking jobs. In other words, these were jobs that did not require a high school degree. In fact, non-degree career positions were more likely to say bilingual or bilingual preferred than those that were not. And so it's again, language isn't about using it as just as a valuable tool to get into college. It's about getting a great job for many of our students. And so these are just a few of those spaces. OSHA says that 25% of workplace accidents involve language barriers, and they actually require safety training in languages that the employees understand. This is a great opportunity for someone in that space. In government services, all different types of government services include language pay compensation, and many include hiring bonuses. In healthcare, a lot of times we think doctor or nurse, but there are a number of different healthcare positions where language is not only is something that they want, but is something that hospitals and medical services will pay for. In fact, the American Nursing Association says the pay differential is 7% more if the nurse happens to be bilingual. And in some areas, it was up to 12% more. And so these are the things your students are thinking about. If they want to go into medicine, for example, they may say, well, I'm going to take AP biology and I'm not going to have time to take the language class. Except it's the language class that will get them the notice. So what do you do in your classrooms? You can make language very practical to your students in lots of different ways. So the first place is to make the vocabulary practical. So whenever I would approach whatever chapter or unit I needed to learn, I would ask, where in the real world would you use these words in another language? And so if we think about that, these happen to be just some household words, but look at all of the different ways household words might be used in real professions. And students need to connect the list to the use of the list. They need to connect it to a real world space. And so those are activities that you might kind of begin to think about. One of the things that I often did was I seated students in my seating charts by career interest. This can work when you're doing project-based learning, if you're in an AP course with our AP themes, all sorts of different ways where you can actually have students learning with each other about how they're and do practical projects using the language with a career that they are interested in. And this is now where it makes it really relevant. I had one AP class where almost 3/4 of the class were interested in science and medical fields. So we did all kinds of projects, and they're using it now as doctors and nurses and other spaces and therapists out in the world. Word walls. This is another great way to start, even with low novices, to start introducing language phrases. Once you do some inventories and some surveys, what jobs are your students interested in, and help them start to think about that in word frames. I want to be, I want to be what the job is, or create some basic sentences and pieces using those. Career speed chats. A lot of you use speed chats in all different kinds of ways, but focus it and think about it in terms of careers. As you're increasing proficiency, pretend that they're playing that role. What did you do today as a doctor? And they're using past tense. I mean, there's lots of different ways to incorporate whatever you're doing in the classroom with applying it into a business or a workplace setting. I love doing this. I brought lots of individuals into my classrooms as a guest that was using the language in their job. And then this became interpersonal for students to ask them questions, to interview them, to learn about how real people used language in real jobs. A veterinarian is a real common one in our particular area. And have students, do the interpersonal writing afterwards and thank them for their visit. Workplace simulation. Again, these are spaces where you can create different opportunities for students to say, wow, I could really do that because I know I've learned how to do that and practice that in my classroom. So again, when we look at 60% of jobs with the highest demand are for individuals with less than a bachelor's degree, Students can actually find a local entry-level job in their own neighborhood. Now, that might be hard for us to conceive, but we have a great little tool available to us now called AI. And so you can go to places like Indeed or ZipRecruiter, and you can just put in bilingual jobs in Omaha or whatever that place might be. What happens is you'll get the job will pull up. This one happens to be for a bilingual customer care representative for a mortgage company. Notice that what the pay is, but if they have Spanish and English, they get $1.50 more per hour. So it's a 7% higher pay scale. Um, what's wonderful about this can help students to understand what they would be using their language to do on the job. And so I'll give you a couple more examples. So you have students collect some jobs that are in their own interest space and start creating their own sort of can-do list of what they should do in that piece. So if I ask AI, for example, what industries or companies in your town hire a lot of bilinguals? You can add more specifics like here's the name of the city, maybe the student puts in medicine for high school students, and ask for it to give you the salary and the job requirements. This is what I did very quickly in about 3 minutes. I happen to use Claude to do this piece, and this is all for Nebraska. So if you look at the lower area, the green area, these are jobs your high school students could do with their language skills. Now, once they've done that as an intern or a summer job or an after school job, they already can now put on their resume bilingual teller at the bank or bilingual customer service representative. Now they have experience using language and they can see themselves continuing to grow their language in those fields. And you're giving them their own pathway to the career that they want with real hands-on work experience using the language to do the job that they're interested in. And it's really fascinating because give you an example with the veterinary science, one of my granddaughters actually worked this summer in a veterinary office, and she was hired because she was bilingual. And this is, and I think they say only less than 4% of licensed veterinarians are bilingual. So there's a huge need there. And so this is something you can do for your students and like, wow, I didn't know. I mean, there's things in health, there's things in banking. I can work at T-Mobile and make, $23 an hour as a Spanish speaker. So this is really exciting for students because this is the job they can envision themselves actually doing and adding to their sort of resume. So once you take those students with things like Indeed or one of the other job services, and it'll list what are the tasks of that particular job. So, for example, in this case, this is an administrative bilingual assistant. This is in Honolulu. Handle incoming, outgoing mail. So you ask the student, would they do that in the language? No. File important documents? Probably not. Answer phone calls? Yes. Set up client meetings? Yes. Bookkeeping and clerical duties? Maybe not. But so now the student starts to collect job piece descriptors and they can add them to their own can-do list that's personal just to them. And now they can start to work toward those goals to be able to do something that's specific to the job that they're interested in. So if you're interested, you can reach out to me and I can send you a blank, or you can create an easy sort of blank list on your own to just have students start to work toward real can-dos that they want to be able to do for a job that they are interested in. So I will close by just saying, and then I'll take questions because I really, want to hear from you. But how then do we make the switch? So if students feel there's a lack of perceived value, that a lack of relevance, that language doesn't matter to their lives or their job or their future, how do we make the switch? And just like we're creating pathways to proficiency, thinking about from novice to intermediate and beyond, The same thing can be true for the language learners in the career space. So begin to talk to your students about how being a bilingual is an entry-level employability skill. It doesn't have to be a high level of skill. They might earn something from $19 an hour. These are using what I found in my very quick search for Nebraska, up to $85,000 a year, working just near home. And so begin to start helping them think about the pathway. So, for example, a banker, they could enter banking as a bilingual teller. These are using the job descriptions that I found, $19 an hour. They can become then a personal banker making more than 22 or more an hour and progress to a higher level portfolio manager, branch regional manager. These are potentials that they're able to do. And banks are a great space where there's a need for bilinguals in certain communities, even more so than in others. A nursing or a veterinary assistant, again, can move from the student who doesn't have a career that's just, doesn't have any kind of degree yet, can begin at $20 an hour and then move through those skills and through the degree program, but already with a resume that says, I worked as a bilingual assistant in nursing or whatever that field might be. The same thing can be true in the manufacturing space. And so, as students perceive that their language journey can also take place in their career space, it's really, really motivating to students. And they will want to stick to it because now it's not only relevant, but it's valuable in terms that they view dollars and cents. And that's also important to parents. So, what we think about bilingualism, it can really open a door, but what you do in the classroom has to connect to students because if not, you will lose them before they continue to get to the level where they actually have language enough to use in a workspace because they haven't made the connection. So you have to make that connection early that here's where you can go. And that's why I shared some opportunities of things you can even do with novice students. Then you want to be sure you document it. The Global Seal provides lots of ways for students to share their certificates, but a state seal is equally important. And students are, if they can have two certificates or two recognitions, that's even more valuable to them. And lastly, help them know that those skills will open doors in whatever field of interest that they might have. And I don't want to kind of close before I say, and you too, as a teacher, can also be Global Seal certified. We have states now that are recognizing the Global Seal as meeting one of those language criteria for teacher certification. Many states that are using things like Praxis, they don't even offer every language. There's only, I think, 14 languages. And so these are opportunities for you to sort of know what your own skill is. And I think one of the things that teachers are sharing with us is that sometimes they don't know their own skill, or their skill is maybe not as sharp as it used to be, especially if you've been teaching level 1 or level 2 and you haven't had opportunities to travel. A lot of times when we see teachers test, their lowest area is usually writing, because it's what they do the least amount of in paragraph or page form at a higher level. So they're writing, really great, good job at the top of a test, or they're writing a test prompt, but they're not doing their own academic writing. And so that has been an aha for teachers because it's helped them understand how better to coach their own students to do well on proficiency tests. So with that, there's a QR code to our website, but I'm going to, and my contact information, but I want to just take some questions and help you, if you have anything that you would like to know more about, if there was something that I shared that you have a question about, or you're not quite understanding, or you have a comment or something where you think that this would be something you could share about what you're doing in the classroom to make language relevant with the others that are here on the call today. So I'm going to stop my sharing and come back to all of you.
Thank you so much. This is very very exciting. I mean, yeah. And thanks for their ideas to actually connecting classroom with career expectations. I mean, this is a really cool idea. I never think about asking students to search for, I mean, potential jobs and help them understand. This is really good. Thank you a lot, Linda. I really appreciate
I
your
have a
presentation.
question. I don't know if I can make my question.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, at the end of your presentation, you were saying that teachers, we can be like a role model, like a by certificate, like a getting the certificate from the Global Seal of Literacy. I am a Spanish teacher and a dual language teacher. So I'm just wondering, what can I do just to get like a certified? I am already a certified teacher for Spanish, but is there a way that I can show my students, like, look at this, I got this one from the literacy and I would like to show you, and these are the advantages of getting this one. And the same for other languages, for instance, French or Japanese or German. So I don't know if they come in a combo or you apply for different or.
So those are great questions. And we do have a lot of teachers. First of all, sometimes they want to try the experience for themselves or they want to be able to add their certificate to their resume or to their email signature, things like that. But also to set that role model example for their students. And clearly teachers are going to be at a higher level of proficiency, which is why our certificate is stackable. And so typically there's two different ways. We have some teachers that will test with their school district. In fact, we have a number of school districts that test all of their teachers. We have a large school district here in Illinois that does a lot of hiring of teachers for languages for some of their dual language programs from that hire teachers internationally, and they use the Global Seal as a way to verify those skills for those individuals before they even hire them. But we also have teachers who want to know their skill or their scores on their own. Maybe they want to know before the school sees their scores. um, and so we do have an individual pathway as well. So there's a number of different ways. We have universities in some cases that have opened their testing centers as well. And we have, for example, a couple of states, Washington, Illinois, where their local teachers, their state teachers organization offers teachers an opportunity to test for the Global Seal. So there's potentially some different ways for you to do that, but each certificate is unique to you will always have your same dominant language. And we identify the dominant language in the language in which you are most comfortable speaking, listening, reading, and writing. And typically that's the language of your primary and secondary school education, not typically where people are most comfortable. And then the second language is that tested language. And while I have, for example, more than two languages, they are at different levels of skill. And so it's not one certificate for that covers all of the languages because it's likely that your skill varies by language. And so but they will all stack into your digital profile. So all of them, if you have four different languages, they would all appear in the same profile and can be shared simultaneously, um, all at once. So they can see and it will list at the top however many languages that you have certificates for. So it's a great way to show off multilingualism, but yes, each certificate is unique and separate to that particular language.
So what I am understanding is like if we already want this literacy certificate, we need to do or pass certain tests, something that some teachers we already did. For instance, I already have my DELE that is for Spanish or CIALE.
Mhm.
So do I need to be tested again or I just can use those ones to be certified?
Well, because we have both employers as well as universities that are using the Global Seal for hiring or for placement, our policy is that we can take a test up to 12 months of age. And so after 12 months, a new test would be required. And that's because we have to ensure the current validity of the language skill for that employer or for that university. And so those are both accepted tests, but the test we for certification purposes, because we have to answer to those programs that are providing credit or jobs that the certificate is was earned, or the date of the certificate is no more than 12 months older than the test.
Okay, so but if it's before 12 months, is we just can send information to you,
Yes,
right?
then you would have the either your school or the test company send us the test scores, and then we would provide the certification. Exactly. Hmm?
Okay, and I have this question, maybe it's not for you. I don't know. Just I'm gonna throw the question. For instance, here in Nebraska, how does earning a global seal of literacy assist with state teacher licensing or satisfy requirements to add new language endorsements? I was gonna say I already have my bilingual certification,
Hmm.
but what if I wanna just be just French? Sometimes they just, I don't know. Sometimes just the employer
Yes,
just needs to know that you are good in a language, and
yeah, some states just use the endorsement. That would be a question more for Crystal. We do, for example, in the states that are using Global Seal, it goes in their teacher account as one of their endorsements or certifications. So, but each state has its own criteria. So I can't answer that question for Nebraska, but maybe
uh,
Crystal would help. You could follow up with her about that.
and I'm just gonna finish with this one because, for instance, I have one student that she's really did excellent in my class, but she has well, she used a sign language, so she is
Hmm.
American Sign Language. So I'm just wondering for those students, this kind of language is also like a part of the global CLE, or it's not, or it's just
No, we have actually, yes, we do. We certify American Sign Language both as a second language, as but also we have individuals who have American Sign as a first language and have another language as well. So that works either way. Yep.
okay, because I have seen those ones like a lot of like languages like a Japanese, French, but there are many students also in high schools that they use sign language, and maybe they don't even know that they can be certified too for this global
Yeah,
scale,
and
and it's
that's
a great
actually
opportunity.
sign language is very employable if they have that. So,
Yeah.
any other
Okay.
questions?
Thank you for so much.
You're very welcome.
Linda,
Yeah.
remember me?
Hi.
So you had IFOTA, you were the IFOTA conference, Indiana Foreign Language Teacher Association keynote speaker. Many teachers benefit a lot from your keynote speech because this is a way they, number one, hold their jobs. Number two, promote students, try different ways to make, no one knows what future is now since AI is in the process now, right? So learning a world language and get a certificate like a global seal is really a good opportunity for people to hold on. Even nowadays, college degrees are not take very seriously now because people can get everything learned from other resources. So certification, as you propose as Global Seal, is really a good way to, just certify certain stages of your standard of certain languages, and this is really good. And talking about yeah, American Sign Language, and they join our conference annually now, so they are one almost. They are talking about establish a branch, a constituent um, organization to Indiana Foreign Language Teachers Organization. So thank you very much, and this is I think we need more promotion. We need more promotion about global SEO, and teachers needs to more opportunities for themselves as well as for their students. So we can prove that this position is important. Teaching position is important. Student needs to know that. Thank you very much.
No, you're very welcome. It's been so exciting for us to see, and universities are shifting to credentialing as well. It's what students want, it's what they believe is valuable, and it's what they're willing to take the class or stay in the class long term to get. And so that is by design, the global seal is stackable. And especially because in language, if we look at all four skills needed to qualify, when the student reaches the baseline to earn our first certificate, which is at that intermediate mid level, in all four skills, probably one, maybe even two skills is already at the next certificate level. So it creates a gamification. So students think, wow, I'm hearing, speaking, and listening, but my reading is already at the next level. So I'll just keep going because they perceive that themselves to be the higher level. They just have to work on one weak skill. And so that creates a gamification for students. And we see that a lot where students will say, well, I'm going to take another year, or it helps them focus on the area of skill that they need most. And so I think that's a really one of the unique features about Global Seal that differs from state seals is that state seals are just awarded to the high school seniors typically, but the Global Seal can be earned at any time. We have a school, it's an immersion school, it's in New Jersey, and they were just featured on ABC News in New York because they had students who were in sixth grade earning global seals in Chinese and in Spanish. And students that are if they are in immersion programs, we see about 4% of our certificates are awarded to middle school students.
Mm.
And if you have students that are in heritage language learners, they they can earn that earlier. And so rather than waiting till the end, you can sort of incentivize because they might already be at intermediate mid, maybe as a sophomore or a junior, and they think, well, I already earned the state seal, so I don't need to take the class anymore. But you can say, yeah, but there's a higher certificate. So again, our goal is to help you keep your students longer so they have enough language to really use it in a way that's personally meaningful for them. And if they drop out too soon, that won't happen. So credentials keep kids focused, and we see it with our schools. We see not only increased numbers, but we see increased numbers of students earning certificates. So try it if you haven't, because it really does work. So thank you for those kind words, Yusun.
Thank you.
Anyone else with a question? I know it.
Yeah, do we have any questions? If
Hello. Hi.
yeah, go
So
ahead.
actually, I'm actually in Illinois too. I teach in Barrington. We have
Oh,
a
okay.
immersion program. So, well, actually, you just answered one of the question I want to ask. So it's not just for senior students, but also actually for the elementary school and middle school students too, right? I think I'm now going to share the information with my director about this because we do have parents who is interested about to earn like a silver literacy earlier time, which is like a middle school or even like the elementary school. My question actually is like for those promoting like the material you was shared with us. So does that mean we just go to your the website of the Global Zero of Literacy to find them? Could you share it in the chat box with us so we actually can have it?
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. And it'll be theglobalseal.com. So I'll put that in the chat box. So you're at Barrington. They have a wonderful immersion program for
Yeah.
Chinese as well as I believe for Spanish.
Yeah, we have DL and CI, yes. So
Yes,
I'm a CI teacher.
yes, and it's no, they have a wonderful program. It goes back to well, that they just I think last year or the year before was their first senior class from
Yeah, we
graduating.
have
So
two graduation
yeah,
yes.
If you have the, so if you as a teacher earn a global seal, that would go on Illinois side into your Ellis account. So, and there is a form on our website to be able to do that to,
Okay.
if you go through that route. But yes, your students, there's a immersion program in Georgia called the Globe Academy, and 60% of their eighth graders earn a global seal at one of our two levels, our first two levels, by their eighth grade year, and they're doing that in 5 different languages, and one of those is Chinese as well. And we did a blog post about that program. So yes, it's totally doable. If you recognize students earlier, it gives parents sort of an external measure of efficacy that your program's actually working, but it
Mm,
also keeps the students excited about pathways moving forward. And in addition to our certificates, we have pathway award ribbons for the pre-certificate levels at novice, mid, novice, high, and advanced, and intermediate low. So a lot of schools and programs. In fact, there is here in Illinois, there is a Montessori program that
mm,
actually does that for their sixth, seventh, and eighth graders. Their eighth graders are starting to earn the certificate, and the other students they're doing the award ribbon program. So there's lots of when you recognize it, students will jump through hoops to get it, and parents are really excited to see their students on stage and recognized. So recognition goes a long way toward motivation for students.
Linda, there's a question for you. It's in the chat box. Is a global seal valid indefinitely, no matter when it is earned?
So the Global Seal does not have an expiration date. It does have an issue date. So what we suggest or what we see with some of our employers is if this is 5 years old, you may feel that it's important to have it renewed or to see, to test it again. But we chose not to do a renewal because we are certifying at intermediate, mid, and above. And what we know about language retention is that when you get into the intermediate space, the loss or what we call learning loss is much, much slower than if I hadn't yet gotten to intermediate. So, and then when we look, for example, at the advanced stages or those different spaces there, there's much, much less learning loss. But it's also very individual. Was that student or that individual using the language, frequently, infrequently? Have they not used it at all? And so when we work with our employers, if they have if it comes as a global seal that's, more than 5 years old, they might want to ask to, have that individual test again. But we leave that up to the employer or to the university to do. So the Global Seal does not have an expiration date on the certificate itself. It has the issue date to say at the time of issue, this was that picture of that particular person's skill. But we do know that that learning loss with regards to language starts to slow down significantly once you're at the intermediate, mid, and higher stage. Then it becomes like getting on the bike again, you know. So you might be a little intimidated. It might take a little refresh, but pretty soon you're back up to speed. So.
Thank you very much. And
Mhm.
there's one question from Jess. Do you think the translative career is being replaced by the artificial intelligence? This is a big question. Artificial
Well,
intelligence.
yeah, no, it is a big question, but actually, according to the translation companies, it is not. Because translation still requires the nuance of in terms of the sort of the tone and other kinds of things that provide specifics. And so, what we see again with AI is when we get into some translation pieces, it not yet, and it may change certainly, but not yet does it have the specificity that's required. So, for a good example of that is just because you are a bilingual doesn't mean you can become a translator or an interpreter because there is another skill, there's another layer to that skill of sort of the listening piece to it's not a word for word, but it's sometimes what are they really saying. So there is a cultural component and some other pieces. And so when they're doing translation or interpreting, there's actually skills beyond just knowing vocabulary and grammar. So that's a piece of it, but it is interesting. But I think what we always will, begin to understand is, and we all use AI in different ways, but that the personal factor, it's much easier to create a relationship with someone with whom you can speak directly as well as trust than if I'm holding a device and have to wait for that device time to work. And so at this point in time, students are still, they would still rather hire a bilingual over a monolingual with a device. But great question. And we'll see. I mean, it's a fascinating space right now.
Yeah, we do. We use a lot of AI to help translation or to smooth certain articles now. But I think people who are professionalized in certain area, they use AI, but they still proofread it because
Yes, absolutely.
it's their expertise to decide whether this translation is good enough.
Or culturally appropriate to the group that you're talking to. And the other piece of it, of course, is, the languages, English, Spanish, and Chinese, there's a great volume for AI to sort of learn from. But in other languages, there is less available. And so that reduces the quality of the AI itself. So because it depends upon, what's out there in the sort of internet space. And if it's been published less, there's less to learn from or work from. So that's it, but it is a fascinating topic. So
Yeah.
anything else? This has been lovely. Thank you all for spending a little bit of afternoon. I wish you a wonderful school year and hope that at least that there's a few nuggets here that will kind of inform your school year and give you some new ways to think about how to connect what you do with your students in a way that they find again valuable. Um, we don't want to just be a check off or entrance requirement for a university because A, that eliminates a lot of those students that the job fields want. But B, it also reduces our value to just, we're there. And I had students, they would cheer when they passed the test with a D because they got that mark on their transcript. Um, and that just it breaks my heart because that's not what they should be. They're going to spend time with me. I want them to acquire something useful for them for their future. So anyway,
Thank you very
Crystal,
much.
I will pass it back to you or
Yeah, me and Mr. Yu will host the end. So
all right.
I
All
think
right.
if we have further questions, people know where to find you, and you
Perfect.
just ask the global CEO. So thank you very much for your
All
time.
right. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you very much.
Bye.
Okay, bye bye. Okay, thanks everyone. That's it for today. Bye.
于老师，你是不是停一下那个录像，还是我们一关机就都行了？
我就直接就是 end the meeting for all.
All
Okay.
right.